It's time to start season number 4 in our NIU Dynasty. Many of the recruits from our first ever recruiting class will see the field this season, including the first ever quarterback we signed in this dynasty, Nick Yeast. He was young and inexperienced though, so our offense was going to need a lot of help from senior Jalen Poe, and thankfully our schedule was a little bit easier than season number 3's. And we had a board that was filled out with almost entirely 4-star prospects. It was now time to officially start season number 4 as the Huskies opened up at home, taking on New Mexico State. Nick Yeast's first drive with the Huskies offense was off to a good start as they would get across midfield. Jalen Poe would almost lose the ball, but after recovering his own fumble, it would be Kevin Shaughnessy fighting his way into the end zone. And that would be Nick Yeast's first career touchdown pass, but New Mexico State would strike back with a touchdown of their own. And after an interception from our redshirt sophomore quarterback, they would strike again. Yeast was looking to make up for that mistake as he was trying to get us down the field and tie it back up at 14, where on 2nd and goal from the 5, he would show off his wheels, taking off out of the pocket and into the end zone for a touchdown. But that would leave just a little bit too much time left on the clock for New Mexico State as they would get down inside the 5. And on 3rd and goal, the Minutemen would take the lead right back before halftime against us. They would miss the extra point, however, so if we could score a touchdown this drive and make our extra point, we would be able to take the lead over them. But on 3rd and goal, Kobe Askew wasn't able to find the end zone, so we would give it to the senior Jalen Poe, who would fight his way into the end zone, and Trent Butt's extra point would give us the lead. This 4th down stop would be a big momentum shift for us if we could get it, but New Mexico State would pick it up and they were continuing to drive the field against us, and that 3rd and goal sack was huge for the Huskies, as we were only down by 2 points and Nick Yeast had the offense moving down the field into field goal range. On 3rd and 5, it would once again be a handoff to Jalen Poe, but he would be marked short, so Trent Butt would come out on 4th and 1 to give us the lead once again. With less than a minute to go, New Mexico State just had to find themselves in field goal range to win it, and the game would come down to this, 4th and 9, as they would go right side, and that would be tipped incomplete, and Coach Brooks and the Huskies would get the close 1-point victory here at home over New Mexico State to open up the season, with Nick Yeast throwing for 112 yards in his collegiate debut. NIU had a step up in competition for their next game on the road, as they were traveling to take on Big Ten opponent Nebraska and had a chance to get an early lead over the Cornhuskers. A late hit on Nick Yeast would set up this Zach Jerdis touchdown rush, but Nebraska would waste no time tying this game back up. Headed to the 2nd quarter, NIU was driving down the field again looking to take the lead back over Nebraska, where on 3rd and goal, Nick Yeast had all day in the pocket. He would take a shot to the end zone for a touchdown, as it would be Cam Thompson putting the Huskies up 14-7 over the Cornhuskers. Inside the 10-yard line now, the Huskies had a chance to extend this to a 2-possession game, and although Kevin Shaughnessy was just short of the end zone, Nick Yeast would go right back to his tight end, making this a 21-7 lead for the Huskies with another chance to score before halftime. With 45 seconds and counting left to go, the Huskies were in field goal range, but Nick Yeast would be picked off. But the Huskies defense had been holding strong all day, and it was still a 21-7 lead headed into the second half. A big completion there to Kobe Askew would set up a 1st and goal where Jalen Poe would take it into the end zone untouched, and this game was starting to turn into a blowout as Nebraska needed points quickly. The Cornhuskers would get it down to a 2-possession game to end the 3rd quarter, and would get the 4th quarter off to a good start for themselves as they would find the end zone once again. With under 2 minutes to go, all the Huskies needed was a 1st down, but after being stopped, they would go for it on 4th and 3 to clinch the game, and Kyle Thomas would pick it up, allowing Nick Yeast to kneel out the rest of the clock, giving them the 28-21 win over Nebraska, marking their first Power 5 victory of the season thanks to a big-time game from Jalen Poe on the ground today. Despite that big-time win, a lot of recruits would end up locking us out after that game, and it was due to the Huskies not having enough remaining games on TV. So hopefully a win against Deion Sanders in Colorado on the road could earn the Huskies some more broadcasted games. The main reason NIU wasn't getting more broadcasted games nationally is because they were still in the MAC conference and not playing enough Power 5 teams. The only real way to fix this problem was to change conferences. So I was going to keep that idea in the back of my mind for the offseason this year if our team plays well. There would be no use in switching conferences though if our team couldn't compete in it. We were handling the Buffaloes pretty well so far in this game, as the only points we had given up had been the safety, and would get a 3rd down stop to hold them to a field goal on this possession. They were marching down the field, however, with just over over 2 minutes to go in the first half, and on 1st and goal, a fake halfback draw wide receiver screen would get them 6 and the lead. After a Huskies turnover, they would get right back into the end zone to extend their lead, but left just enough time on the clock for Nick Yeast to try and get his team down the field. On 1st and goal, he would quickly hit Kyle Thomas as the senior would fight his way into the end zone, giving the Huskies a chance to take the lead with their opening possession here in the second half. They would do just that with a Nick Yeast quarterback sneak and would go for 2 to make it a 3-point game, but would get stopped just short of the goal line. Colorado would score 9 unanswered points, forcing the Huskies to have to go for 2 again if they found themselves in the end zone this drive. After converting a 4th and 4, they would be rewarded with a touchdown, and this time would actually succeed on their 2-point conversion. Facing a 2nd and 21 with less than 2 minutes to go, the Huskies actually had a chance to keep the Buffaloes out of field goal range, but would instead give up a touchdown to them. Nick Yeast now only had a minute to try and drive his team down the length of the field to send this game to overtime, but instead would be picked off by Colorado's defense trying to take a deep shot across the middle of the field. That interception would secure the win for Colorado as they would get the 35-28 victory here at home over us. On the bright side though, we would schedule a visit for our first ever 5-star recruit, outside linebacker Juan Rosario, but we were still locked out of half of the recruits on our entire recruiting board. NIU was back at home for its final non-conference game of the season, and they were taking on the undefeated USF Bulls. The Huskies were looking to get a 3rd down stop and force a field goal on the opening drive, but some missed tackles would lead to a touchdown, and NIU found themselves down early in this game 7-0, looking to make up that touchdown. Just short of that 1st down, they would keep the offense on the field, but Kyle Thomas would be stopped short and USF would take full advantage. With just under 2 minutes to go in the first half, Nick Yeast needed to get his team down the field and some points on the board, as Coach Brooks kept the offense out on the field for yet another 4th down try. This time the Huskies would actually convert it, and it looked like it was paying off as they were getting closer to the end zone, where on 3rd and goal out of the Wildcat formation, it would be Zach Jaredis finding the end zone for the Huskies. Hopefully NIU could get off to a better start here in the second half than they did in the entire first half, as Cam Thompson would find the end zone on their first drive, and after getting a defensive stop, they were moving down the field yet again. On 1st and goal, it would be Kobe Askew on the wide receiver pitch finding his way into the end zone, but it would not take long for USF to tie this game right back up themselves. They had an opportunity late in the 4th quarter to take the lead back, where thankfully our defense would get a 3rd down stop and only force a field goal. That would leave just over a minute and a half for Nick Yeast to try to get the offense down the field 50 yards, and this drive was off to a great start with that big time completion to Kevin Shaughnessy. Now faced a crucial 3rd and 1, Jalen Poe would be stopped just short, and yet again the Huskies would go for it on 4th down, picking it up and setting up a 1st and goal where Jalen Poe would find the end zone, giving the Huskies a 4-point lead, and all they would need is a stop on this final play as they would get it, closing out non-conference play here in season number 4 with a 28-24 victory over the Bulls at home. Somehow after that win, we only had 1 recruit now on our board that had us locked out, and part of that was due to our first conference game of the season against Kent State being broadcasted on television. The Huskies defense would force a 3-and-out to open up this game, but were faced with the possibility of going out 3-and-out themselves as Nick Yeast would find Kevin Shaughnessy, who would pick up a big-time 1st down, as that would keep this drive alive, bringing up now another 3rd down. Nick Yeast would roll out of the pocket, showing off his wheels as he would take this down inside the 20. The sophomore quarterback definitely being the most mobile quarterback we've had in this entire dynasty, capping off that first drive with a touchdown on his feet as the Huskies would go up 7. The Huskies defense had been playing great so far, but the offense needed to match that as it was only 7-0, and Kyle Thomas would make it 14-0, and just as we say that, Kent State would manage to go down the field and score a touchdown of their own as Nick Yeast would throw an interception, setting up a 1st and goal from the 8 with under 2 minutes to go in the first half, but the Huskies defense would force a fumble Jorge Fabroni is gonna pick it up for the Huskies. He had one man to beat. Could he beat him down to the 30? But he would be caught, setting up the Huskies with only 20 yards to go to find the end zone here before halftime. On 1st and goal from the 6, Nick Yeast would roll out to his right on the run to find Kevin Shaughnessy, and the junior tight end would put his team up 21-7 as we would move to the second half. Coach Brooks kept the offense on the field for a 4th down, and it would pay off as they would pick it up but would be faced with another one, as this time Trent Butt and the field goal unit would be sent out. With that field goal from the freshman, this game was all but over as the Huskies had a 17-point lead. But they weren't done yet as Jalen Poe would get the call on the ground, fighting his way into the end zone, giving NIU the dominant 31-7 victory over Kent State here on the road to open up conference play, with the sophomore Nick Yeast having one of his best performances of the season so far. After that game, we were still thankfully down to only one recruit that had locked us out so far, but we would lose out on the 4-star defensive tackle Casey Traynor to Michigan State, and 4-star receiver Taylor Keener would end up signing with Miami. Despite losing those two prospects, we found ourselves ranked in the top 25 for the first time this season, and had what should be an easy upcoming game against Buffalo on the road. Now that we'd made it to the top 25, the playoffs were in view for us. It was a long stretch for us to make them, but if we won out, there was a possibility, and that win streak would have to start for the Huskies today here against Buffalo. It wasn't looking good for our offense as they wouldn't score in the entire first quarter, but the defense was stepping up for us. But even with their best effort, we still found ourselves down 3-0. Facing a 3rd and 6 right around midfield, we needed to pick up a 1st down to keep this drive alive to get some points, and thankfully would find ourselves in the red zone where Zach Gerardis would take this handoff untouched into the end zone. The score would stay 7-3 throughout the rest of the first half, but the Huskies had a chance to change that in the 3rd quarter, getting down to the 10-yard line where on 2nd and 1, Jalen Poe would get the call and find his way into the end zone, giving us a little more wiggle room here with a 14-3 lead over Buffalo. Our offense wasn't able to do anything though the rest of the 3rd quarter, and Buffalo was driving down the field now inside the red zone, looking to make this a one-possession game as on 3rd and 11 they would pick up the 1st. So we needed this stop on 3rd and goal as we would end up getting the goal line stop, and the Bulls would be forced to settle for a field goal, but it would be blocked by the Huskies. So with no timeouts remaining for Buffalo, all we needed was a 1st down, but Kyle Thomas would give us plenty more than that, with the senior's touchdown clinching this game 21-10 for us over the Buffalo Bulls here on the road. That win would land us our 1st recruit as well, as we would sign 4-star quarterback Terrence Redmond, and thankfully nothing else had changed on the board as we were still only locked out by one recruit. The road games continued for the Huskies, as this week they were taking on Eastern Michigan in Ypsilanti, and it was not off to a great start. Interceptions had been an up and down problem for Nick Yeast so far this year, but our defense had his back as Connor Bragg would get one right back. Our young sophomore quarterback was looking to make up for that mistake on the first drive as he would take off running on 3rd and 5, showing off his wheels, getting the offense into Eastern Michigan territory as Kobe Askew would get us inside the 5, where on 1st and goal, Nick Yeast once again would show off his wheels, getting into the end zone. The 2nd quarter would be off to a much better start for us as Zach Gerardis would take this one in untouched, and every time Eastern Michigan had got close to scoring, our defense would take them out of position. With just under a minute and a half to go now in the first half, Nick Yeast was looking to take his team down the field, but once again, the young quarterback would take a shot deep and would throw another interception to Eastern Michigan's defense. Just like they had all season, our defense had his back though and would get a stop, and now Nick Yeast was trying to get us down the field once again as Kyle Thomas got us inside the 10, where on 2nd and goal, Nick Yeast would take it in on the quarterback sneak, putting us up 21-0 over the Eagles to start the second half, where again Nick Yeast would use his feet on the ground, giving us a 28-0 lead as our second unit would play the entire 4th quarter. Even though the youngsters on defense would give up the first touchdown of the day to Eastern Michigan, we would still walk out of here with a comfortable 35-13 win. This next game back at home against Ohio in Week 8 was a big one for us, as we had our first ever 5-star prospect Juan Rosario visiting in DeKalb, along with 4-star gem middle linebacker Antoine Penny and 4-star free safety Corbin Dog. The Ohio Bobcats are currently sitting at 2-5 have on the season so far, and we're near the bottom of the MAC conference this year. Hopefully that meant this should be a pretty easy matchup for the Huskies with home field advantage for us today. We seem to be moving the ball down the field no problem on our opening possession, but then Nick Yeast would do what he does best sometimes, and that is throw an interception. Thankfully, our defense would get a stop, and we'd be right back in the red zone here. Looking to score here is on 3rd and 1. Pressure would come for Nick Yeast, but Coach Brooks would keep the offense on the field, which would result in a touchdown. Ohio's offense hadn't been able to do anything at all in the first quarter today, so that would give us a chance to go up 14-0 here in the second quarter, and it looked like it was going to stay that way as the Bobcats offense still couldn't get anything going. That defensive stop would leave us just over 2 minutes to try to get down the field and tack on some more points. As from our own 17 on 1st and 10, Nick Yeast would look right, he would throw in, he would be picked off for the second time today. This time it had dire consequences as there'd be no one on the Huskies offense to stop this pick six for Ohio. 81 yards, and just like that, the Bobcats were right back in this game. And after not being able to pick up a first down, Trent Butt would have to kick a field goal for us, and it would only be a 10-point lead for the Huskies headed into the second half. The defense would get things started with a defensive stop against the Bobcats, and then on 1st and 10, Kobe Askew would get us down inside the 5, but after taking a sack on 2nd down and an incomplete on 3rd down, we would once again have to settle for only a field goal. It wasn't probable, but it was still possible for Ohio to complete a comeback as they'd take a shot on 3rd and 22. That would be knocked incomplete though, so 4th and 22 now for the game, and somehow this would be completed. We'll see if the Bobcats have some 4th down magic again, as on 4th and 16 it would be knocked incomplete, and the Huskies would take over, needing only one first down to seal the game here, as Zach Jairus would do just that for the Huskies, and they'd get the big time 20-7 win here at home over Ohio with recruits in attendance. And speaking of which, this win would land us 4-star tight end Bryce Hainsey, 4-star middle linebacker Antoine Penny, and our first ever 5-star recruit Juan Rosario would sign with the Huskies. Despite signing 3 recruits, we would end up losing 3 recruits as well, including PJ Gage to Iowa, cornerback Glenn Merrick to Michigan, and outside linebacker Kiki Chukwuma to Rutgers. That had left us with only 4 recruits so far we had signed halfway through the season, giving us only the 52nd ranked recruiting class in the nation currently. Hopefully a win here at home against Western Michigan for the Huskies could help secure some more recruits in the class. The defense would start out great today, as on 3rd and 7 we would almost come away with an interception, and the offense could be unstoppable today if Nick Yeast could continue making throws like this. We did find out, however, that Jalen Poe partially tore his MCL at the end of last week's game, so it was going to be up to sophomore Zach Jairus stepping up to fill his role as running back number 1 for the rest of the year. The sophomore was off to a good start so far, but couldn't find the end zone on 3rd down, so the offense would stay on the field for another Nick Yeast quarterback sneak. That play has worked so well for the Huskies this year and has turned into their own version of the tush push, but another thing that's been occurring is this. Another interception from Nick Yeast, and that would allow Western Michigan to tie it up at 7 apiece. That interception really seemed to kill the momentum for our offense in the first half, as we hadn't been able to get anything going the rest of the second quarter until we would come away with an interception of our own on defense. A huge stop there, not allowing Western Michigan to get in the end zone, but unfortunately our offense would go 3 and out once again as we headed to the second half. The Broncos were marching down the field on their first possession and were inside the red zone, where on 2nd and 2 it would be an RPO to the left side and the Broncos would take the lead. Nick Yeast and the offense was still struggling in the third quarter as he was almost picked off again, but finally would find ourselves down inside the red zone here at the start of the fourth, where Nick Yeast would dump it off to Zach Jairus, who would fight his way into the end zone, and instead of tying it up, we were going for 2 to take the lead as Kyle Thomas would just barely get it here. That still left over 3 minutes on the clock, however, for Western Michigan's offense. They had made it down to the Huskies' 23-yard line, but would take a sack on 2nd down, and facing a 3rd and 16, pressure would come again for another sack. That would take Western Michigan out of field goal range, so the offense would stay on the field here and take another sack. And with the Huskies defense coming up with that huge stop, all they had to do was run the clock out. Western Michigan had no timeouts left, so a first down here would seal the game, but they would be short. So sure enough, Coach Brooks left his offense on the field, but they wouldn't get it. That would give Western Michigan the ball right around midfield with a chance to drive down and win this game. But after that incomplete on 3rd down, this 4th down play was for before the game, and the Huskies get the stop, and they would just barely walk away with the 1-point victory over Western Michigan, with Zach Gertis having a great game filling in for the injured Jalen Poe. As we had hoped, that win got us another recruit in right guard Jamison Brightwell, but we needed more recruits on the board, so we would go after 4-star athlete Brian Kendricks, as well as 4-star right end Terrell Herbig. Not only did that win land us another recruit, but it landed us a potential spot in the college football playoffs, and making the college football playoffs would be the only way we'd see Jalen Poe return to the field this season. The Huskies were back at home taking on the Bowling Green Falcons this week, and they were starting with the ball, driving down the field early on against our defense. On 3rd and inches from the 9, thankfully our defense would come up with a sack and would force the Falcons to settle for a field goal, but the kick would be blocked. That would be picked up by the Huskies defense, taking down the left side of the field to the 30, to the 20, to the 10, and to the end zone for a touchdown. A great start to this game for the special teams unit for the Huskies, but Bowling Green would waste no time at all, answering right back. It was nearing the end of the first quarter, and this was the first time Nick Yeast and the offense saw the field, as their first possession would result in a punt, and we're hoping for a better result on this drive. Faced with a 3rd and 1 now, not wanting to settle for a field goal, Nick Yeast would roll out to the right and dump this pass off, just barely picking up enough for a first down, as on 2nd and goal, the Huskies would find the end zone, and we're looking to score another touchdown. 4th and goal, the offense would stay out on the field as Nick Yeast would find his way in, and it was a 21-7 lead here for the Huskies headed into the second half. NIU's field goal unit would come out, but on 4th and 7, this kick would be just short, and now Bowling Green was trying to find their way down the field to get back into this game here at the start of the 4th quarter. It would be a lot of work though, as they were down by 21, setting up the halfback screen on 1st and 10, as this would be taken into the end zone for a touchdown. And this game wasn't over yet, as the Falcons were driving down the field again, but the Huskies defense would come away with an interception, with one more first down being enough to seal this game for the Huskies, as Nick Yeast would pick it up, and NIU would walk away with the 28-14 win over Bowling Green here at home in DeKalb, with Nick Yeast getting back on track with a great game tonight. That win would also land us 4-star free safety Corbin Dog, as well as 4-star right guard Jimmy Fowler. We would add 3 new recruits to our board, including 4-star tight end Denzel DeLoach, 4-star athlete Brian Kendricks, and 4-star right end Terrell Herbig, but we would be losing out on 4-star gem right tackle Taylor Prado to Wisconsin. The Huskies were so close to cracking the top 5, as they were now ranked number 7 in the country, and were still favored to get the first round bye in the college football playoffs. If they wanted that first round bye in the playoffs though, they would have to continue winning here at home, and this week's matchup on paper was supposed to be an easy one. The 2-8 Redhawks would get down the field to score first on their possession, but Nick Yeast had the Huskies offense looking polished to start the game. On 3rd and 4, the sophomore would drop back to throw, but he would be intercepted by the Redhawks defense. Thankfully, the defense would come up with a stop, giving the Huskies another chance to score here, as Nick Yeast would show off his wheels, throwing on the run to find Kevin Shaughnessy. And even though it took until the second quarter, the Huskies would take a 7-3 lead here over the Redhawks. 1st and goal from the 2, it would be a play action, as Yeast, rolling out to his right again, would find Zach Gertis, as he would stumble his way into the end zone to make it a 14-3 lead for NIU. The Huskies were trying to get down the field here to get some more points before halftime, but after taking a sack there, would have to settle for a Trent Butt field goal. 17-3 was not a bad lead for the Huskies to have though headed into the second half, as Nick Yeast would start by taking a shot left side, and that would be his 2nd interception of the day. The defense would have his back once again though, getting the ball right back for the Huskies, as Zach Gertis would find his 2nd touchdown of the day, and Kyle Thomas would add on one more for NIU, as they would get the dominant 34-10 victory over Miami here at home. That win would land 4-star tight end commit Denzel DeLoach, and would lead the Huskies into their final game of the season, where they were taking on their rivals, the Toledo Rockets, who are currently 2nd in MAC conference standings. NIU's defense was looking to force a 3-and-out on this first drive. Even though they would do that, the offense was now facing the possibility of a 3-and-out until Nick Yeast would take off, showing off of his legs, Yeast, eventually getting his offense down in the red zone where it would be a handoff to Zach Jaredis, where on 2nd and 4, Nick Yeast would drop back to throw, would find Dwayne Cousins for a touchdown. But the Rockets weren't far behind as they were driving down the field. This completed to the left side would be a touchdown for them as well. And just like that, this game was tied 7 apiece with only 3 minutes to go in the first half. The Huskies wouldn't get any points that drive, but they would have another chance with just over a minute remaining in the first half. But on 2nd and 1, Nick Yeast would end up taking a costly sack. That would set them back to a 3rd and 7 where it would be a play action, and he would just barely get this off, thankfully not being intercepted, allowing Trent Butt to knock home a field goal. This game was a lot closer than the Huskies would like headed into the second half as they picked up a 3rd down conversion, finding themselves now inside Rockets territory from the 13. Zach Jaredis would take this into the end zone, and that is the start this Huskies team needed here in the second half. A big time sack there would bring up a 2nd and 16, but that wouldn't stop this Rockets offense from scoring, making it now only a 10-point game headed into the start of the 4th quarter where the Huskies needed to get a stop. The Rockets offense would stay on the field here on 4th and 4 where the Huskies would get a 4th down stop. Maybe a controversial placement, but the ref said the ball carrier moved backwards. So now on 3rd and goal, it would be a handoff to Zach Jaredis who couldn't get in, but the offense would stay on the field. You know what's coming. It's a Nick Yeast quarterback sneak. And that touchdown would put this game away for the Huskies as they would close out the season with a 31-21 win over their rivals. That win would not only land us 4-star wide receiver Thomas Hand, but it would also land us in a rematch against Toledo in the MAC Conference Championship. We had 2 recruits remaining on our board, being 4-star Brian Kendricks, who we had a lead over Georgia for, and 4-star right end Terrell Herbig, who we also had a lead over Kansas State for. The Huskies were still projected to get a 1st round bye in the college football playoffs, and if we could get a win here in Detroit, that would absolutely secure us a 1st round bye. So let's see if we can win the MAC Conference Championship against Toledo. Our first drive, we would be facing a 3rd down and would go 3 and out, with our defense looking to do the same against Toledo, and we would come away with an interception. That would give the Huskies great field position in the red zone as on 3rd and 4, Nick Yeast would go down. So no touchdown from that turnover, but we would still get 3 points. After stopping Toledo on their 2nd drive of the game, we had another 3rd down as our offense just couldn't seem to convert any of their 3rd downs here in the first half as Nick Yeast would be picked off along the right sideline by the Toledo defense, giving them great field position here. Backed up to 3rd and 15, they would take a sack, and just like our offense did, they would have to settle for a field goal as well. With a minute and a half to go in the 2nd quarter, tied at 3 apiece, Nick Yeast would connect with Dwayne Cousins for a big time touchdown, and our defense would force the Rockets to punt on the following drive. That gave us just under a minute to go to try to get down the field to score some more points here, but Yeast would be picked off once again. Currently out of field goal range, our defense needed one more stop to try to keep them from scoring points here, and they would get it as we held on to our 7-point lead headed into the second half. Toledo would start with the ball, the Huskies defense trying to force a 3 and out, but instead they would come away with an interception to start the second half, giving Nick Yeast and the offense a great opportunity to try to extend this lead as Kevin Shaughnessy would convert the 3rd down, something the offense wasn't able to do a lot of in the first half, as now Kyle Thomas spinning his way into the end zone, and the Huskies would make this a 2-possession lead with just under 2 minutes to go in the 3rd. Moving to the 4th quarter now, Toledo finding themselves nearing the red zone as this pass would be completed, and it would be a touchdown for the Rockets. And this game was not over. 3.5 minutes to go, Huskies only led by 7, 3rd and 10. Kevin Shaughnessy would pick it up with only 2 timeouts remaining for the Rockets. The Huskies deep inside the red zone now, Toledo using their 2nd to last timeout. The Huskies 1 1st down away here from winning this game as Kyle Thomas is going to pick it up, and the Rockets burn their final timeout as all Nick Yeast has to do here is take a knee for the Huskies. And that'll do it here in Detroit, Michigan, as the Huskies pick up their 3rd conference championship here under Coach Brooks. That conference championship would see the the Huskies jump from number 5 to number 4 in the country, with Nick Yeast finishing his first season as a starter with an up-and-down year, 2,295 yards, 20 touchdowns, and 17 interceptions. Jalen Poe, who missed some time with an injury but would be returning for the playoffs, finished the year with 774 yards and 5 touchdowns. But redshirt sophomore Zach Girdis stepped up in his absence with 505 yards and 4 touchdowns, as he was going to be our number 1 running back headed into next season. One of our offensive leaders, Kyle Thomas, the senior receiver, finished with 629 yards and 6 receiving touchdowns. And our first ever 4-star recruit we landed, Kevin Shaughnessy, would be returning for his senior season after putting up 537 yards and 4 touchdowns this year. Jorge Fabroni, who was a recruit from our first ever recruiting class with the Huskies, led the way with 48 solo tackles, 65 in total, and 5 tackles for a loss this year. With the 2 recruits remaining on the board, we would lose out on Terrell Herbig, unfortunately, to Kansas State, and still had a chance to land Brian Kendricks, but had fallen behind North Carolina State. We really wanted to land one more 4-star, as we currently only had the 43rd ranked class in the country. What we did land, though, was a first-round bye in the college football playoffs, and would be taking on the winner of the first-round matchup between Georgia and TCU, where we would be taking on TCU in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. So let's head on down to the field and see if the Huskies can get a win in their first ever college football playoff game. The Horned Frogs would start with the ball first, but the Huskies would force a 3-and-out, although it wasn't looking much better for their offense, as on 3rd and 13, they would throw a halfback screen that would be marked just short. So both teams would punt on their opening possession, but the Huskies were getting in the red zone now, where on 3rd and goal from the 5, Nick Yeast would drop back to throw, and he would find Kobe Askew for a touchdown, and the Huskies would strike first to go up 7-0 here in the Peach Bowl. TCU was looking to answer with a touchdown of their own here in the second quarter, as they found themselves inside the 15, where on 3rd and 2 it would be a quick pass to the goal line, knocked incomplete, but the offense would stay out on the field, and the Huskies defense would get a 4th down stop. A big play there from the defense, but now the offense would need one, as they were backed up to a 3rd and 21. They wouldn't be able to convert it, so Trent Butt would come out for a field goal, and I don't know where he was kicking, so it was still only a 7-point lead with just under a minute and a half to go for TCU, as they would fumble the football and the Huskies would recover. NIU's defense getting 2 huge stops here to end the first half, and as a result, we would head to the start of the 3rd quarter with the Huskies still only having a 7-0 lead over TCU. They were looking to change that, though, as they were driving down the field here on 3rd and 9. Nick Yeast taking off, showing his legs, and fighting his way into the end zone. And the Huskies now were up 14-0, and the defense was still getting stops. A 3rd and 3 now for the Huskies nearing the end of the 3rd quarter, as this drive would stay alive from the 16. Now Nick Yeast rolling out to his right, but he would be picked off for the first time today, as TCU would take the ball right back from the Huskies. And instead of going down by 3 possessions, TCU had a chance to make it a 1-possession game. 1st and goal from the 7, it would be a handoff up the middle, completely untouched for 6. But the Horned Frogs would miss the 2-point conversion, so with just over 2 minutes to go, they still had all 3 timeouts left. The Huskies facing a 3rd and 11, TCU needing a stop with only 1 timeout left, but Kobe Askew would pick up the 1st down and plenty more, taking this down inside the 30 to the 20, with TCU using their final timeout, meaning all the Huskies had to do was kneel the clock out, and they would get a big-time victory over TCU here, 14-6 in the 2nd round of the college football playoffs, thanks to a great performance from sophomore quarterback Nick Yeast today. And the Huskies would find themselves in a semifinal matchup in the Orange Bowl against number 2 Arkansas, with 12th seed UNLV taking on 9th seed Michigan in the other semifinal game. A win in this game for the Huskies would mean a trip to the national championship for them. So right out the gate, Coach Brooks had them playing aggressive, and that had got them down to the 25-yard line of Arkansas on their very first drive. But that's where it would end, as Trent Butt would come in and knock home a field goal, putting the Huskies up 3-0 over Arkansas, as the Razorbacks would take the field for the first time on offense today. Not far from the red zone, they would be facing a 3rd and 7, and the Huskies would get a stop. So Arkansas's first drive would end in a field goal as well, with both teams being tied up at 3 apiece here with under 2 minutes to go in the first half. NIU was looking to score here on 1st and goal, as Nick Yeast would find Kobe Askew in the end zone, and that would give the Huskies a 7-point lead headed into the second half. Unfortunately, they would go 3-and-out and were were now trying to get a third down stop against Arkansas, which thankfully the defense would do just that and the Razorbacks would take 3. Once again, the Huskies would find themselves going for it on 4th down, but the quarterback sneak wouldn't work and Arkansas would take over on downs. This would give them great field position, but they needed to pick up this 3rd and 14 as the Huskies would make them throw it away, where they would look to make it a 1-point game to end the 3rd quarter, but the field goal would be blocked and it would be picked up by Connor Bragg, and he would take this all the way down to the 30, to the 20, to the 10, and to the end zone for the Huskies. After another touchdown, it was not looking good here for Arkansas as they were down by 18, and if they wanted any shot at staying alive, they needed to pick up this 4th down, but instead would be intercepted by Daquan Hunter, which that play would seal the game here for the Huskies, as they would pick up a victory in the Orange Bowl over Arkansas, and would be playing for a national championship against number 8 Michigan. It had only took 4 seasons for Coach Brooks to get the Huskies to the national championship, and they had a real chance to win it here tonight, taking on 8th-seeded Michigan. Both teams would go 3 and out to start their opening possessions, but the Huskies now were finding themselves near the red zone, as on 3rd and inches, it would be a wide receiver pitch to Kyle Thomas, who would just barely pick it up. Setting themselves up now with a 1st and goal, play action, Nick Yeast rolling out, dumps it off to Mitch Kumar, who would fight his way into the end zone, and the sophomore redshirt would get things started here for the Huskies in the national championship. Michigan, however, would get down the field right before halftime to kick a field goal, and were putting together a good-looking drive to start the 2nd half as they would find their way down inside the 5-yard line and down to the 1, where on 1st and goal, they would pound it in for their first touchdown. It had been a slow day for both offenses as it was only 10-7 here at the start of the 4th quarter, but Nick Yeast and the Huskies offense were moving down the field slowly but surely as they would pick up another 1st down. 3rd and 6 from the 16, Nick Yeast would drop back to throw and he would find Kevin Shaughnessy, setting up a 3rd and goal now as Zach Jerdis would get the call, but he would be well short of the end zone, so the Huskies would settle for 3, but their defense hadn't been able to slow down Michigan, who was fighting their way down the field. From the 7-yard line, 46 seconds and counting, the Huskies would get the stop, so Michigan's field goal unit would come out to give them a 3-point lead. Nick Yeast had to move the ball 77 yards with 34 seconds and counting for the Huskies, but his only focus was trying to get his team into field goal range and get this game to overtime. That pass would be completed to Kevin Shaughnessy, setting up a 1st and 10 as he'd go deep down the field, and that pass would be intercepted by the Michigan defense as that will end this one. Michigan would come out to kneel the rest of the clock out, and that is how this season would end for the Huskies. Utter heartbreak, losing in the national championship and having to watch Michigan raise the trophy. Losing the national championship was not how we wanted our season to end, but we would follow that up with losing a recruit as well in 4-star Brian Kendricks to NC State. Headed into the offseason, one of our young upcoming cornerbacks, Malik Cobb, wanted to transfer out, but thankfully we were able to get him to return to DeKalb. Our 2 notable players we were losing this offseason was senior Jalen Poe and senior wide receiver Kyle Thomas as well. We were hoping to land some transfers in the portal though and would go after Trayvon Dunbar, free safety Sam North, and Minnesota's left end Garrett Combs, but this just didn't seem to be our offseason at all as we would lose out on all 3 of them. That would wind up giving us our lowest rated recruiting class in the entire dynasty so far, with only 9 recruits coming in at number 79 in the nation. On the bright side, we did see some good progression as junior right outside linebacker Kevin Coffey was close to becoming our first 90+ overall player on the team. The big move this offseason though was that the Huskies were leaving the MAC and joining the Big Ten Conference next season, and taking their place in the MAC Conference would be the UMass Minutemen. Now, I did screw up and didn't change the conference settings, so we are only playing 4 conference games next season, but that will be fixed the following year. But nonetheless, I'm excited to start season 5 as number 2 NIU makes the jump to the Big Ten and has their eyes on a national championship.